I'm going to hand over now to our next session. So there's some good friends of mine from Calypso are going to join in a moment, and they're going to be talking to you about digital product creation's teenage years. Now, I love that title, not just because I was a bit of a rebellious teen and it takes me back, but I think it accurately describes the sort of thorny transition that anything needs to go through if it's going to go from initial proof of concept and initial kind of growth and upshoot, and it's going to get to the equivalent of full-blown adulthood. It's going to get to a stage where it's available, it's mature, it's able to use it at full scale. Now, I know Will Yester and Alison Coddaire from Calypso, they've been heavily involved in researching how the industry is developing towards that 3D and digital product creation maturity. I know they've got some new research to talk about here, and I know they're also intimately involved in steering the industry in the right direction. So I'm looking forward to their session. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the data from their report, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming Will and Alison from Calypso on stage now. Hi, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Always great to see you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. In a way, our story is it's a great segue from Sue's story. If Sue's story is that of one brand, going through COVID and really leveraging the power of 3D technology, our story sort of zooms out to an industry level based on some research that we did this year and have been doing for the past 6 years around what retail digital maturity looks like. And so that's what we'll talk about today. We'll talk about how our 2022 DPC maturity results look like. We'll cover that really quickly. But we do want to get to that topic of just where we are and where are we going. What does adulthood look like for digital product creation? I don't think we're there, and we'll talk about why, leveraging the survey results, and how we get through our teenage years, where while we've made some great accomplishments, we've got some growing pains still. We're still learning a lot, and there's work to be done to continue to mature. So I'm going to pass now to Alison. Alison will just tell you a little bit about our firm and set up the survey.
Thanks, Will. So my name is Alison Coddaire. I'm a manager here at Calypso. If you don't know us, we're Calypso. So we are a global management consulting firm. We're focused on helping our clients discover, create, make, and sell better products by leveraging digital tech and capabilities. Within our consumer practice, we serve retailers, manufacturers, brands, excuse me, across all product categories, helping clients achieve their goals and partner to deliver results like greater speed and responsiveness, lower product cost, improved sustainability, and meeting the challenges of today's ever-shifting world. All right, so we classify the work we do into 8 important capabilities. The core capabilities on the left-hand side is where we partner with most of our clients. We support their enterprise product technologies such as PLM, DAM, et cetera, and manage the enterprise data. We work with them to help them investigate, develop, and align their shorter and longer term technology strategies in this changing environment, so with the rapidly changing landscape. We also we focused on developing new operating models, processes, calendars, org structures to drive innovation and support achieving the business goals. And then finally, standing up 3D and end-to-end digital product capabilities. That's the focus of today's discussion in DPC. All right, so when we talk about digital product creation with our clients, this is a common visual that we use. We call it our digital thread. We view DPC as an end-to-end process embedded in go-to-market product development. It stitches together many functional capabilities with connected information. These capabilities focus on leveraging the digital to make better decisions faster. So the capabilities we touched on the last slide, they live here within this thread. And these capabilities are supported by a strong foundation, inclusive of the many items we just discussed, such as operating model, change management, governance, the data, et cetera. Those and the technology that manages this new way of working. So our digital thread and the foundation are key to what we do. Back in 2016, we also started doing some research by surveying our clients in addition to the client work we deliver. We transitioned to a larger industry group eventually, and so now we've conducted this research 6 times to understand how retail clients are investing in and adopting these digital capabilities. Since 2019, we focused on the maturity within digital product creation space, leveraging those functional capabilities I just hit on in the last slide. The research has continuously shown growing adoption in this space and the importance that DPC plays within our industry. So for now, I'm going to pass it to Will, who is going to take us through the survey we conducted this year.
Thanks, Alison. So I'll spend about 10 minutes just walking through the highlights of this year's research. The research is available for download if you go to Calypso's website, and I'm sure the 3D Tech Fest team has made that link available. So if you want to read in more detail, we have a full report out where we will talk about that. But the 4 topics that I'll just cover briefly today is we do want to talk about sort of the top line maturity results. And then a few other topics that we surveyed on. We want to talk about what this year's barriers to DPC adoption are. We want to talk about how brands are leveraging resources, a mix of internal and external resources. We also want to talk about that foundational technology adoption that we think is critical for maturing into adulthood with this capability. For those of you who haven't taken the survey, the structure of the survey, as Alison said, is very much based on a 5-point maturity scale. So as she said, we've got 18 key capabilities on our digital thread. And we survey 1 to 5 on both where do you believe from a current state perspective you are now, and where do you think you will be in future state in 2 years' time. So you can see the scale here. If you survey yourself as a 1 for a capability, say digital materials, it means you really haven't spent any time investing in that capability. If you're a 3, it means we've conducted some experimentation or some proof of concepts towards implementation. And then if you're a 5, it means that this capability has been scaled to a meaningful segment of the business. And so that's really the structure, and we've done it going all the way back to 2019. We started leveraging the thread in 2019. We did it again in 2020, and now for a 3rd time in 2022. And so it's interesting. We now have sort of 3+ years of results. We've got a pre-COVID and a mostly post-COVID set of responses. And of course, I think as everyone can anticipate, this year's was quite a bit different, quite a bit more mature. And so let's get into the results on maturity. So, not surprisingly, the headline here is a rapid increase in maturity across the board between 2022 and 2020 and 2022, and also looking ahead to 2024, kind of continued maturity. One thing I should say about the scale, sorry if you go back one, Alison, to the scale. And this is important context for the results. And many of you who have been through this probably can recognize this. To go from 1 to 3 can be done relatively quickly. If you're, have a good plan, you can get from 0 to proof of concept in the span of a few months. If that proof of concept's successful, and I know, like Sue in the prior presentation, a lot of proof of concepts were successful and validated during COVID, you can get to 4 pretty quickly. You can make the decision, we're going to move this ahead, we're going to invest in this, we're going to start to scale. I think what you'll see in the survey results is step 4 is the long step. Step 4 is what will take us several years to be in the process of scaling, and then we'll finally reach scale for a significant part of the business. So let's look at the comparison 2020 to 2022. What you see on the left half of the slide here, first of all, you can see the capabilities listed along the left, just divided across discover and create, make, and sell, just like we have in our thread. The arrows with the dotted lines represent the 2020 results. So as you can see, our 2020 results, which was surveyed, right towards the beginning of COVID, it was in the summer after March, summer of March of 2020, you can see where the industry was. It was advancing around proof of concept for many of the discover and create, many of the design capabilities. Within make and sell, still very early. Some strategy work being done, some investigation, certainly some proof of concept, but very little that we would say at scale. if you compare it to the 2022 results, and this is again current state, so where brands feel like they are right now, you can see that across the board, we are close to hovering around that 4, meaning in the past 2 years of COVID, brands have very quickly accelerated a learning program, a proof of concept and experimentation program, and have committed in many cases across these capabilities that this is the future and we're going to start the process of scaling. If you go to the next slide, you'll see all from the 2020 result report. You'll see the current state results compared with what we said were the future state results. So we asked brands to look out in 2024, look out 2 years, and tell us where you think you will be. And obviously, when you get to 4, there's not a lot of places to go but up. So, we saw, and I think we will see this kind of incremental movement from, in the process of scaling, where many brands in some cases will think they will be at scale and at level 5 by 2024. But that's very much the world that we'll be living in for the next few years. And that's why we called it the teenage years. We feel like we're beyond learning. We're committed. We're making progress. But a big part of the rest of the talk will be about how these 18 capabilities, to me, are really just the building blocks. And what maturity looks like is truly building out that thread of connected, efficient, collaborative information. But let me go through a few more 2022 topics from the research. First of all, barriers. This is a question that we have been asking for years using similar language. And it's interesting always to see how the results shift a little bit between the topics. So if we go to that slide, you'll see there's a lot of text. You can dig in more if you download the research. But we ask, hey, check all that apply in terms of barriers that you're seeing in your team scaling of digital product creation. And interestingly, this year, the 2 big ones were sponsorship and funding. If you compare this to the results in 2020, sponsorship and funding were actually relatively low. The top one was process and culture. And I think that showed where we were in COVID, working remotely. All of a sudden, we have to adopt a new culture. We have to work more remotely. We have to leverage digital tools. And it was painful for many of the teams to adopt those. Now that we're sort of through the other end, we've had good success. We're ready to scale and expand. We're running back into an issue that we had maybe 3 or 4 years ago around, hey, we need more funding to stitch this together into the end-to-end capability that we see as our future, that we see as adulthood. And by the way, our digital thread is at its core cross-functional. So sponsorship and governance and getting alignment between, design, production, merchandising, marketing, all the functions in our company that want to leverage this connected capability is more important than ever. So that's sort of our hypothesis for why we see those things pop back up to the top of the barriers list for this year. The next topic, third topic we want to talk about is technology adoption. So in addition to those, point solutions, what we call functional capabilities on the thread, I also saw a heavy amount of foundational capabilities. And so we ask through the survey, the core foundational technologies that we see for this would be PLM. How do we manage the data around the product and the materials? How do we build the BOMs? 3D authoring tools, the tools that we actually use to model and simulate the apparel or footwear or accessories. And then maybe a newer capability for product creation, which is digital asset management or DAM. Where do we store all these heavy files? And so we asked the clients, hey, we see these 3 technologies as being somewhat interconnected. So are you connecting these technologies? And I think what we found in the black text, the black boxes, was only about average 40% or less, about a third of our clients have made current investments in these integrations and connectivity. And you can see next to the arrow, so 34% between digital authoring tools and digital asset management, 39% between DAM and PLM, and maybe the greatest percentage here between PLM, and digital authoring tools. Still a relatively low percentage given how important these foundational technologies will be for meeting scale and meeting adulthood. When we ask them where they'll be in 18 to 24 months, you can see the results jump up to 90%, meaning everyone sees this as a key investment and a key thing that they will be working on in the next 2 years to get to that maturity and to get to adulthood. Now, I wanted to show the results on the right as well, because this was the first year that we've asked. Obviously, there's been a lot of attention, and rightfully so, towards metaverse and NFTs. And so we also wanted to ask, hey, is your brand investing in NFTs in the metaverse? I think we were interested in these results. Similar percentage, have been able to stand up and invest in an NFT and a metaverse capability. And I think many of you have probably seen this in your brands, just the excitement over the last 6 to 12 months. These are words that probably 18 months ago weren't in our vernacular. And so it's interesting to see how capabilities there have been invested in and stood up even faster than what I would call a core and foundational capability that really enables product creation. So the digital-only capabilities, of course, they're digital only, so we can stand them up faster than having to connect to real product. But I thought that was an interesting sort of contrast in where we are with those capabilities. And then the final point that I want to hit here is around internal versus external resources. This is a topic, and I credit Ben Hansen because he was the one when we did the 2020 results who suggested this topic based on questions that he gets from brands all the time in his role at the Interline is, how are we creating assets? How are we scanning materials? Who's doing the work? And so that was a question that we've asked. And on the next slide, you can see it has shifted a little bit in COVID. So the bars here are basically 4 groups that we said are responsible for creating. On the top, you can see what I would say 3D materials, so digitizing fabric. And on the bottom, I would say 3D product assets. And what you can see here is a mix of vendors, third parties, and agents. And then you can see within a brand a center of excellence or kind of a consolidated team versus what we would say an inline team is, which is really the designers and tech designers and product creators, hands on the 3D tools, creating assets and creating materials. I think a couple insights. One, we saw a bigger use of agents this year, which is not surprising. I think everyone was expected and forced to scale. And in many cases, agencies and other third parties were available to pick up some of the slack, to chip in, obviously at expense cost, and really help brands do the work of 3D in a virtual world. So we definitely saw an increase there. We saw a pretty dramatic decrease in the light blue shade, which is internal centers of excellence. I think that is a trend that we will see going forward. Those types of groups have been typically instrumental in standing up a brand's initial capabilities. But because they're centralized, they're sometimes inefficient and disconnected from the business. And so, I think what we'll start to see if we continue to ask this question is we'll start to see, growth in the red bar, which is our inline teams, both on materials and assets. And I think we'll also continue to see a growth in the purple bar, which is our production partners, our vendors who obviously within the asset space grew quite a lot in terms of how they were able to provide 3D assets back to their brands and vendors. So interesting space to watch is in terms of just the mix of how we get this great work done. So that's really covers what we wanted to talk about from a research perspective, summarizing the 2022 results. But we want to kind of close today with where we think things are going. What does this tell us about what the next 2 to 4 to 10 years looks like in this capability? And I'll pass back to Alison to just take us through some of the insights there.
Thanks, Will. So for us, the survey results were surprising somewhat. We knew that maturity was going to increase rapidly as brands had accelerated and expanded the use of virtual and collaborative technologies through COVID. But it was surprising to see across the board adoption and the level of maturity that self-reported that we reached. But we also know from the client experience that progress has been made, but there's significant barriers. And at times it's slow and challenging for all the reasons that we called out earlier on the barriers to adoption slide. But referring back to our thread, so what we're seeing today is while we do see maturity growing, it's isolated. So you can see here, we lost some of those dotted lines. So the progress is happening, but there's a lack of connectivity, a lack of data, visuals, processes. And our hypothesis here is that this is one of the fundamental reasons that clients continue to feel hampered in spite of the growing maturity. So that's not surprising either, though, because we are in a maturity curve. It's normal, right? So we're following a really typical adoption curve here. COVID in 2020 was our hype peak, brought all of the attention, investment to the 3D capabilities. But we expect disillusionment to follow, right? So that's where we are today. So to get through it, though, we need to work to connect these capabilities together, building connected, collaborative capabilities that drive those enterprise efficiencies and benefits. We also need to do the difficult process and organizational work to continue embedding these capabilities into the way we work. It's all part of growing up, right? As we become teenagers, we have this set of experiences, and part of becoming an adult is coalescing those into a person. I like Ben said, the thorny transition. That's where we are. But if you look at the gray bar here, we've been here before. This is when we started utilizing 2D tools, Illustrator, moving from hand sketch to the digital tools that we are all familiar with. But we got to a place of productivity there, and we're going to get there with DPC as well. To do that, though, some examples of what we mean. So rather than purely scaling, investing in individual capabilities like 3D design or digital materials, we need to build what we call connective and collaborative capabilities. So bundles that generate outsized value of these capabilities. Here are some of these examples of what we're seeing our clients start to build. So we're looking at how we can collaborate seamlessly between brands and vendors so that we're adding value along the way and reducing handoffs. We want to visualize print and pattern development, creating rendering pipelines to line plans so that merchants can utilize those 3D assets efficiently to replicate the work that they do in 2D workflow. And then utilizing those individual 3D files in real-time environments to create immersive experiences both for internal and external customers. And then we need to achieve true photorealism by connecting these capabilities, the materials, the render pipeline, straight to e-com for customer-facing applications, whether it's marketing, e-commerce, retail, etc. So connecting these capabilities are what are going to push us into adulthood, move us past our teenage years. All right, so what's next? So closing this off, we believe that the investment and energy around DPC, it's at an inflection point. We are like a teenager. These retailers know enough about each of these 18 capabilities to be dangerous and start to scale, but to reach true maturity, true adulthood, and the benefits that DPC promises, we have to continue to build on what we've learned so far and take things to the next level. COVID forced us to make rapid advancements over the past 2 years. These were great advancements, but we are not done. They're not sufficient. There's more work to come, connecting these capabilities and data to create user experiences that are new to internal and external customers. Cross-functional teams remain critical. We shift from functional focus to collaborative focus. How do we move things through the pipeline with all teams aligned? Technology and integration, it's a major gap, all right? I think we know that. It seems like the information that Will just said, we know that we need to prioritize getting to maturity in that space, and it's slowing down our productivity that we're not there yet. Executive sponsorship remains critical. It's up there again. Investment needs will continue to come up as we build those integrations and foundational technology connections. And knowing all of that, we're going to shift our survey. So we're going to think about how we do this differently next year. Now that we've reached around the forwards and the maturity, we have different questions we need to ask. So we will be thinking about our survey differently, but it's going to continue because of the valuable insights that it brings. Thank you all for joining us today. Will, do you want to add anything?
No, just thanks everyone. As I mentioned, the survey is available for download if you want to read more. It was done with great partnership from Coresight Research. who helped us expand the base of responses this year to over 250. And as Alison said, survey on the same topics to show that we're going from a 4.2 to a 4.4, not very valuable, but starting to really look at how those, connected collaborative capabilities, those bundles of individual things come together and drive organizational efficiency, benefit, speed, really the benefits that we all know are there from our 3D work. That will be the focus going forward. And we hope that you all participate in the future. And we thank you everyone for your time today. I don't know if we have time for questions, team. Okay, we don't.
Yeah, no. There was one very brief question, which is around what comes after 3D. Is it augmented reality? And I think that's kind of it's addressed to an extent when you're talking about building some of those capabilities where you extend that of it downstream. You talked about how people are investing in bringing together digital asset management, how they're bringing that together with their digital creation tools and those kinds of things. Once you have the 3D asset, you have the ability to leverage it however makes sense for your go-to-market strategy, right? Is there anything quick that you want to add on that one?
Only that, I think that's a great application. Metaverse has certainly been, as I mentioned, a key topic. And in order to populate the metaverse with assets, we need to have those engines to create them at scale. And then we have to have a pipeline that allows us to push a high fidelity design asset into a real-time rendered environment that you could use in a consumer-facing or AR, VR type application. So the work is all right there. Many clients and customers we work with have gotten to POC, have said, we can do this for an asset or a series of asset. Now we have to figure out how to do it at the scale of our business and at the speed of our business. So that'll be grown up.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think based on my own experience, part of being a teenager is learning some hard lessons and making some hard investments in things, and in some cases, making hard investments in digital asset management to allow you to get to some of that downstream, some of those exciting new use cases. It's difficult work. You might not want to do it, but it gets you to where you want to go. So, Will and Alison, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.